Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the simple workforce management software for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Gareth Rees, founder of ADHospitalityD, neurodivergence and hospitality consultant and advocate. Coming up on today's show, Gareth gets to the heart of humanity.
At the end of the day, most of us are really nice people.
Phil speaks his greatest philosophy. Everything is possible in flip-flops. And Gareth delivers a satisfying truth.
Neurodivergent or not, we all know how satisfying ticking something off your to-do list is.
All that and so much more as we chat through Gareth's brilliant journey so far, including a really important conversation around neurodiversity, leadership, performance and understanding the people behind the job. So please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like and a share wherever you can. Enjoy! And a massive Hospitality Meets welcome to Gareth Rees.
Thank you very much for having me, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to having a really nice conversation.
Yes, likewise. How are you?
I'm very well today. As we were just saying, the sun is shining. It felt like a very long, rainy winter this year, so it's nice to finally have some sunshine.
Yes, indeed. What did my wife saw something in Aldi, in Aldi's marketing it was, that said something along the lines of, because it's cold today, and here we are, we're talking about the weather already.
Yes.
We've got to do that as Brits.
Of course.
But yeah, Aldi said we opt out of second winter, which is what it feels like today, because temperature's down to like 7 degrees.
Yes.
And they're like, and I'm with that. I'm now ready for spring to take hold.
First day of sunshine, shorts came on, and I will stick with that until probably around about middle of October when it really starts to get a little bit chillier.
Yeah, whatever the weather.
Exactly.
I have a saying, and it's actually probably a belief, it's not a saying, is that everything is possible in flip-flops.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Excellent. We're going to have a really good discussion today. We've already covered off some really important things.
Just a pair of flip-flops and you're good to go.
Yeah, totally. Good stuff. Right, well, for the uninitiated, if you could just tell the world what it is that you do.
Of course. So I now run a business called ADHospitalityD, and the goals of ADHospitalityD are to educate the hospitality industry as a whole about the neurodivergent experience working within hospitality. So from two sides. So the first side being people who work within the industry who have a neurodivergent condition and what that means for them and how that may present, and help those people to thrive as well as they can in the industry. And then the second side is helping to educate those who may not be as familiar with neurodivergent conditions and showing them what a neurodivergent condition is, what a neurodivergent condition isn't. There's a lot of myths and stereotypes out there that I want to try and help dispel, and how they can support people in the entire industry or in their wider personal lives as well that have neurodivergent conditions, and just try and make the industry a better place than it already is, and it's already a wonderful place.
Nice, yeah. But you touch on, you touch on a great deal, many things just in that short section alone, just around like the education piece. I think that's to me certainly as somebody who, I speak to an awful lot of people, and I go to an awful lot of things, and this is on the agenda right now. I think for a lot of organizations, a lot of people. But I also think that we're still in that phase, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we're still needing education in this area, because it's not, I think the intention within the industry generally is to get it right, but there's still probably a gap between what in principle is the right thing to do and where we're at now.
Absolutely. So, funnily enough, it was Neurodiversity Celebration Week last week. So that's a global initiative. It was founded in America and then made its way over to the UK. And it's all about celebrating neurodiversity, and a lot of that is in the workplace. And one of the the key points of discussion I saw a lot with this Neurodiversity Celebration Week was, I think it's in its 6th year of running now, and people discussing how, so kind of when we discuss social issues or marginalized groups, we have kind of phases of awareness. So that first phase is typically a phase of celebration, of pride, of awareness that this thing exists. And that's brilliant, you know. So 10 years ago, someone opening up about having autism, ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, it wasn't necessarily, it was, you know, it was accepted, but it wasn't necessarily, you know, there wasn't a movement around it. And in the last sort of 5 years or so, we've moved into a kind of awareness and a celebration stage, which is brilliant. But now a lot of people talking about how we're now ready to kind of move on to the second stage, which is more of an appreciation stage. So it's where we've accepted that this issue exists and we are aware that it does exist. We are aware of roughly what it is. And now people wanting to start talking more about the challenges that people with neurodivergent conditions face. And one of my kind of key phrases that I use is that we have to value the strengths but appreciate the struggles. So people with neurodivergent conditions have a plethora of amazing strengths that they can bring. But at the same time, there are struggles that they face as well. And without helping to support them through those struggles, then people with neurodivergent conditions will struggle to display those strengths to the best of their ability.
Yeah. And do you know what? The word that just came into my head there as you were saying that was, in actual fact, the way you just described that for me is utter perfection
Oh, thank you
around
very much.
the fact that there's phases that you go through when an issue is presented, and this is any issue, we're not just talking
Yeah,
about this specific one,
absolutely.
is that first of all there's a group of people who will come to the party with this particular issue and go, look, we don't feel like we're being heard or met or whatever whatever the issue is for that particular group of people. It then gets discussed. It then either gets taken on as something, yes, we want to get better, or people reject it, or whatever, and you move on. And then what you're describing is the phase where people get educated, understand more. Don't necessarily have to understand every single nuance,
Exactly.
but
Yeah,
understand
absolutely.
the existence of the particular issue, and then integrate it,
Yeah,
in whatever form that looks like. And in this case, we're talking about identifying where the strengths can be added into a business, but also where the struggles are going to be added in. And that's really, I think, that is, I mean, that's just humanity 101, isn't it? That we figure out a way how to integrate so that everybody has a seat at the table to be able
yeah,
to move something forward.
yeah. And the thing is, the hospitality industry is so wonderful at doing that. I mean, the clue is in the name. We are hospitable by nature, and I'm so proud to come from such an industry that welcomes diversity. It welcomes difference, whether that be race, creeds, gender differences, sexual preference differences. The hospitality industry has been, I like to think, a leading industry in diversity and inclusion and acceptance, and just seeing people for the people that they are, no matter what their characteristics may be, and supporting each other, working together to overcome challenges, and to work together to do what we're all here to do at the end of the day, which is to help people have a wonderful time when they come to our establishments.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not just about the guests, right? That is about
Exactly.
whoever walks through the door.
Yeah.
In whatever form that looks like. Yeah, we'll definitely talk more about this as we get into the conversation, no doubt.
Hmm.
But actually, what I really want to do is take you all the way. But there's obviously a story as to how you've ended up being in the position that
Yes.
you are now. So take us all the way back to the beginning. How did you get into hospitality in the first place?
Absolutely. So my journey in hospitality literally starts from the start. So both my parents were hoteliers. I was lucky enough to grow up in the beautiful town of St Ives, where my dad was the general manager of a hotel, and my mum, she was quite a pioneer of working from home, shall we say. So she worked from home as his personal assistant whilst sort of looking after me with school and childcare commitments. So I've been around the industry for as long as I can remember. So I can recall kind of on days off popping into other hotels so Dad could pick up their brochure and flick through it and see what they were doing, and driving around town to see what the rates on the signs outside, when you used to kind of have your A boards with your chalked up rates on the road. So I've always been around it, and as soon as I finished school, naturally, I remember my mum kind of writing up a very bare CV, as 15-year-old me had, and just telling me to go into all the restaurants and the cafes and the bars and pubs and hotels and just say I'm looking for a job. And I was really lucky to start my career down working on Porthmeor Beach in a place called West Beach Cafe, and I fell in love with it. I loved the buzz, the kind of, I don't want to use the word chaos, but at times it was chaotic.
Yeah,
And
for starting,
but
use it.
actually, those were some of my kind of most enjoyable shifts. Were when you're kind of teetering on that brink of everything going down, but you managed to get away with it in the end. I loved it, and I remember I did kind of summer after summer there, and I remember every year I went back, it kind of drew me in more and more. And my original plan was to go and be a PE teacher. So I really enjoyed sport when I was younger, and I thought being a PE teacher or something in the sports science field would be what I wanted to do. And then actually went to uni and did 2 years of sports science before realizing that sports science is actually not just playing rugby and writing a couple of essays. There
Well, and
is
it's
some
just,
actual science
you know what?
involved in it.
The
Yes.
the funny thing is about that is that I see a great similarity between you and I in that respect,
Mm-hmm.
because when I was a kid, I didn't really have a clue what I wanted to do, but
Mm.
I'd loved sport, and I remember going
Yeah.
to a university open. It was like a massive careers convention. All the universities were basically trying to sell themselves, but also
Mm.
make themselves available so that you could have a discussion around what your intention was and all of that. And I remember going to Glasgow University's stand and speaking to the guy about sports science. And I really wanted to do sports science. And he said to me, yeah, it's not like you're going to have to like almost straight A your results to get
Yeah.
in. It's not playing rugby. It's not playing football and all of that. And I was like, what? I don't
Yeah.
know about
Yeah.
that.
Yes, it wasn't quite what I was expecting it to be. And again, I'd been going back to West and working on the beach every summer, and hospitality was becoming more and more, what I wanted to do. And funnily enough, even though both my parents were hoteliers themselves, it was my mum that, when I kind of broached the subject with her, was very honest with me about what hospitality is, and especially having come through the industry herself in the kind of 90s and 2000s, where the industry was different than what we are today. And there's been huge improvements made. But she was honest with me, and she said, look, it's all, it's great that you enjoy your summer job and at a junior level, and I get it, that that's what I loved, but just know that as you climb that ladder, and it does get tough. The hours are long. It is, they can be unsociable. You've seen what it's like to try and juggle kind of childcare and a family life with hospitality. And she was very honest. But I think after lots of kind of conversations where it became quite clear that this wasn't a phase of mine, but she said something to me that has always stuck with me throughout my career. And she said, look, absolutely, I will 100% support you with whatever you want to do, but I just want you to promise me that whatever you do, you go and do it to the fullest of your ability, and you do the very best that you can if you're going to pursue something. And that's always stuck with me in hospitality, and it's why I've always wanted to do the best that I can. And like I said, yes, 2 years into that sports science degree, I was maybe not enjoying myself as much as I thought I would be. So I, just on a whim, I sent an email to the hospitality director at Cardiff Met, where I went to university, just to kind of put the feelers out there, float the idea of what the chances were of me being able to swap over to hospitality. And she was brilliant. We had a discussion, and she offered me a place to. So instead of going all the way back to first year, I could start straight into the second year. And I bit her hand off, and I made the transition over. And funnily enough, looking back now, I can see the ADHD now that I've had my diagnosis. But the difference I found from being on a course where I actually really wanted to be there and I was interested in the topics, compared to sports science, where, like I say, I love being on the rugby pitch, but I wasn't that interested in the biomechanics of a gymnast on the vaults. But give me a lecture on issues in the food and beverage industry, brilliant. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be engaged. I'm going to be making notes. I'm going to go and, do that essay. And looking back now, I can see how that kind of fits into my ADHD. But so I did my hotel management degree at Cardiff Met and was really proud to graduate. And it was in the kind of final few months of my degree that I went and worked in a beautiful hotel in Bath called the Royal Crescent. I wanted some kind of more. I had the experience of kind of casual dining in a coastal area, and I wanted some more kind of luxury 5-star hotel experience. So I went and worked at the Royal Crescent in Bath, and I remember chatting to the hotel manager there who had come from, he previously worked with the Exclusive Collection, and it was him that said to me, look, if you really want to kind of go somewhere in the industry, he said, have a look at the Exclusive Collection and, look at their graduate management scheme, and I'd really recommend them. And that's what I did. I went away and, I could see they had this, really good ethos, really good culture, brilliant grad scheme. And then just by sheer coincidence, I was at a conference at the Celtic Manor, and I saw that Danny, the managing director of Exclusive, was doing a round table, and it was about graduate employment in the industry. And actually, I remember participating in this round table and kind of conversing with him in this round table setting and other members of the industry. And then as this, I think it was 2021 at the time, kind of walking up to him, kind of nervous and knock-kneed, and introducing myself. And he just immediately put me at ease, considering this was, an industry titan, managing director of one of the largest or most successful hotel groups in the country. As soon as I spoke to him, he was just a nice man.
Yeah.
And that's what hospitality is. It's these titles that people have, but at the end of the day, most of us are really nice people, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And so I was really
The
lucky
simplicity
to.
that's overlooked sometimes, I think, maybe.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was really lucky to go and do my grad scheme with the Exclusive Collection. Started in September 2019, so we had a great kind of 6 months, and then obviously COVID came around and threw a bit of a spanner in the works, but did what I could. So that was a great time for me to learn some of the maintenance side of things. So I can remember spending that time kind of doing all those little jobs that you just don't get time to do when you've got guests in your hotel. And I was lucky enough to come back after that lockdown and be assistant reception manager, which my passion was always and is food and beverage. I was always knew I wanted to be a kind of food and beverage specialist, but I knew if I wanted to make my way up to a GM role that I needed an understanding of the entire operation. So I wanted to spend some time in reception and really, really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed learning the room side of things and seeing that guest experience from, making that booking on the phone and then checking them in and seeing them throughout their stay and then being that person saying goodbye on checkout. I love that kind of whole process of looking after a guest stay. But kind of 2 years after that, I'd just finished the Master in Old Aspiring Leaders Diploma with Dr. Hilary Cook, and that was an amazing experience. Anyone listening that's in, for any reason in two minds about whether or not to apply and pursue that, the Master in Hold Aspiring Leaders Diploma, absolutely do it if you can. It's a wonderful experience. But the opportunity to become food and beverage manager came up, and I couldn't turn it down. As I said, food and beverage is my passion, is what I love. And I was so excited to start this job, and I had a brilliant, and looking back, I still loved it, but it was the first time in my career where, and not in an arrogant way, but I started to struggle. I went from being kind of my output being judged on my ability to provide service to guests to my ability to facilitate others' ability to provide service to guests. And also you then get the commercial aspect when you hit that head of department level and the administrative load that comes alongside that. And that was where I started to struggle with things. And the classic old age adage of, well, if I just work every hour that possibly exists, then something will start to work.
Yeah,
And
power through.
exactly. And as many of us know, that's not the truth. I was kind of, I'd forget to do orders, fall behind on emails. And, I think it was, and like I say, my idea was to just, I think part of me thought, well, if I'm working every hour possible, then people can't be angry at me for not replying to an email. But that excuse kind of quickly runs out. Don't get me wrong, the leadership team were absolutely wonderful, but of course, if your financial director asked you for something 3 weeks ago and you haven't even acknowledged the email, then there's going to be a little conversation that happens.
To this point, then, you had not had a diagnosis or anything like that, so you were literally
No.
you'd kind of thrown yourself into this career, which seemed to really resonate with you almost by the
Yeah.
sounds of it from day one. Like it sounds like, that first moment that you walked into the little local place, like it almost feels like you were grabbed. And I suppose the principle is that, when your objective is to ensure that the guest that comes in has the greatest experience possible. That's a tactile thing that you're in control of. There's no admin associated with that, right? That is literally about being nice to somebody and ensuring that they have everything that they need in order to have the best possible experience. But when you start climbing the ranks, and then all of these additional tasks come in, that if they don't immediately appeal to your natural way and your natural personality of things, then I mean, that's difficult for anyone, but I think especially then, if you begin to ask questions, and I assume this is what happened, is that you begin to ask questions. Why is this, like, this is actually maybe something I want to do, but why is it so difficult?
Yeah, absolutely that. And that was the thing, it was, hospitality was what I wanted to do. And I was at this point in my career where I'd had a wonderful career, and I'd made the steps. The feedback I was getting on what I was doing was really good. And then all of a sudden, I kind of hit this block in the road where it was like, oh god, like, if I can't keep up with the admin of being an F&B manager, how am I going to, progress and be an ops manager, a DGM, a GM? And I just kept trying to do the same thing. And I've always been very good at kind of not getting away with things, but I'm kind of, it's a common trait with people across with ADHD. I'm never. It's not that I would be specifically not doing a task because I didn't want to do the task to cause an issue. It was just that I really struggled to get those tasks done. There's a theory called the interest-based nervous system, which, I don't want to tangent off into kind of scientific theories of ADHD, but essentially,
No, please do.
It's essentially it's a theory that a typical person has something called an importance-based nervous system. So they would prioritize and kind of do tasks based on their importance. So that may be the urgency of them needing to be done, the impact that doing that task or not doing that task will have, and also something like the authority of who has delegated you that task. So you may prioritize a task that your GM has asked you to do as opposed to a task that your a fellow colleague has asked you to do. Whereas with ADHD, the theory is that people with ADHD operate on something called an interest-based nervous system. So instead of prioritizing and fulfilling tasks based on importance and a typical kind of method of prioritization, they will prioritize tasks based on essentially how enjoyable or how fulfilling that task is for them. So that is why, for me, something like admin is not enjoyable for me at all. I get absolutely no pleasure, and ADHD is very closely linked with regulation of dopamine, so a hormone that's kind of your, similar serotonin, that kind of feel good hormone. Whereas spending 2 hours on the floor on a Saturday night on a busy service, absolutely, I love that, and I will choose that over kind of, I should be writing a report, but I could be on the floor. I'm going to be on the floor. And that was starting to cause issues. And yeah, by this point, I had no idea that I had ADHD. It wasn't something that I'd ever considered because, even growing up, for me, ADHD was something that kind of naughty little boys who bounced off the walls and were really disruptive in school, and that was ADHD. That's the stereotype that existed and to a certain extent still exists. Whereas I think it was kind of post-lockdown where we started discussing neurodivergent conditions a little bit more and started seeing content online about kind of symptom traits, and kind of started putting some dots together and potentially kind of thinking maybe this is something I need to explore. And essentially things got to a point where I had just put myself into a position where my idea of just working around the sun, and also there's a part of me that didn't want to admit that I was really struggling, kind of led me to a point where I was just in a really bad place, and I
Right.
wasn't effective for my team, I wasn't effective in my role, and I knew that something kind of had to change. And I had a really kind of good process with my diagnosis. So my first step was to contact my GP, and there's a kind of NHS questionnaire that they will send you prior to an appointment as a kind of blanket questionnaire. And I filled out this questionnaire, took it along to my appointment, and had a really great discussion with the GP. She said, "Look, from the discussion we've had and from the answers to the questionnaire, I think this is, I'd be happy to make a referral for you, and it still actually falls under the mental health service, even though they are closely linked, but mental health and neurodivergent conditions are two separate things, but there are overlaps. And as we know, the mental health service with the NHS is vastly stretched to look after mental health. So with a huge increase in neurodivergent conditions, has created wait lists of 2 to 5 to 8 years in some areas, which
Wow,
is
blimey. Yeah,
it's
when people
incredible.
really just need it like right now.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Without kind of, and I was not at this point, but it was during kind of some research that levels of suicide ideation in people with ADHD is 5 times greater than in the general population. And then you think of, we know the waiting lists for mental health service, and then you've got what could be up to an 8-year waiting list for seeing someone to discuss your ADHD. It's it's a whole other issue and topic that I could go into, but it was actually the GP that said to me that the waiting lists are very, very long. So if you're in a position to kind of look at a private route, then I very rarely suggest private care, but I would suggest having a look into it. And I went away and I did that, and I was very lucky to be able to maybe not comfortably afford the private routes, but stretch my finances and tighten my belt a little bit for a few months. And I went down the private route, and I remember I did the final part of the assessment, which is kind of the face-to-face interview, and it was about 90 minutes having a conversation with a clinician. And at the end of that, I think it wasn't blasé, but the way he said to me in such a matter-of-fact tone that, like, after assessing you, I can see, he able to say that I believe you have combined type ADHD, so that's hyperactive and inattentive, which is the most common type of ADHD. And I remember hearing those words and this feeling of kind of a mix of relief, of a little bit of sadness in there, but it was almost like taking off kind of this weight on my shoulders that I didn't even know was there. And I remember there's part of me that kind of reflected a lot about what could have been, for example, but that I can never change that. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I think what it gave me then was a a level of acceptance that the reason I was struggling with certain things wasn't because I was any less or any worse than somebody else. It was just because my brain works differently to someone else, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to employ tactics that aren't suited to me and don't work for me. And it gave me the confidence to go away and do the research into what ADHD kind of really means for me. And I will say there's a lot of content out there about ADHD and neurodivergent conditions now. So, and that as with any subject area, some of that content is more enriching than others. So it was really kind of eye opening to really kind of delve into what this meant and have the confidence to say, look, this is the way my brain works. I will never quote unquote cure this. It's something that I live with, and what I can do though is accept that and adjust my ways of working in ways that are more conducive to my success. And it took me a while, but I started to do that. And just, really simple little things like, the classic productivity kind of mantra of eat the frog, and I could, any kind of, you Google productivity tips at eat the frog, do that, get that big task off your to-do list. Like, I get it for some people, absolutely, get it out of the way. But for me, if I sat down at my desk and I've got this big task at the top of my to-do list, I would just sit there, I will find everything and anything I need to do that will allow me to avoid doing that big task, because I don't have that buildup of kind of dopamine in my system to tackle that task. Whereas if I flip that on its head and I do something called eating the frog last, where I start my to-do list with, say, 5 really easy tasks. So reply to an email, or just simple things that you can just tick, tick, tick. And we, neurodivergent or not, we all know how satisfying ticking something off your to-do list is. I'll do a task that wasn't on my to-do list and write it down and cross it off, just to, get that feeling that I've achieved something. And you find that, for me, builds up momentum. So if I, send that email, or, finish that blog that I was writing, it's a couple of little paragraphs, brilliant. I've done a few things. Right now, I'm in a state where I'm ready to tackle that big task. I've built up some momentum. I've got over that state of paralysis, and now I'm ready to tackle that big task. Whereas if I try to do that first, then I'd be.
Yeah, it's almost like you haven't filled up your dopamine cup high enough in order to be able to tackle it in the first place. It's so funny. I have not heard this phrase, the eat the frog, until this in the last 6 months. And I remember having a discussion with, I have a mentor that supports me in learning more and more about commercial sales, and that's my kind of day-to-day role. I'm a business development director, and I've never had a problem with the front end human to human part of it. But the process behind it, sometimes I really struggle with. So I've been working with a mentor to try and help me become better at that. And we spoke about the very same thing, around the fact that my natural energy goes towards the stuff. In fact, it's on my personality profile and insights. So there was a line in there that said something like, you could sit in a meeting with Phil and you could all agree a course of action, but in the end, he's just going to go off and do his own thing. And that speaks to, and maybe 10 years of being an entrepreneur probably doesn't help that. But equally, it's I find it difficult to go after the ugly frog first. Sometimes, even though I see the logic in why it would make sense to shift that. It's really interesting you say that.
5-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
Yeah, and funnily enough, I can see your insights blocks behind you there. We have exactly the same profile.
Really?
Yes, yellow, green, both blue. But
I've got next to no blue.
Nothing. Organisation is my absolute downfall. But and I started to see things improve in work after that, and I was really happy to kind of feel like I was, getting back on my feet again, and proving to myself that I deserved to be where I was, and I was really happy to be achieving again. But as is another kind of trait with ADHD, something that we are motivated by is novelty. So we love new things, and the kind of novelty of these systems started wearing off. And by this point, I'd moved into a new role. So I was now the deputy GM in another hotel in the Cotswolds. And, there was part of the starting a new role, kind of that, wanting to make a good impression, and that kind of helped, and, really trying to do the best I could. And then I kind of got comfortable, and I could see old habits starting to slip in, and I could see emails spending a little bit too longer in my inbox. And, I kind of was trying to think what to do. And just that, I didn't plan to have this conversation. We sat down for a kind of 6-month review. I sat down with my hotel director, and during this review, I opened up to her about my ADHD, which is something I hadn't yet done in that business because I was still quite new. I didn't, whilst they were a very progressive and accepting business, you never know kind of what people's views are going to be.
Yeah.
And she was absolutely wonderful. She met my openness with kind of curiosity, and she asked me what that means for me and how ADHD affects me, and how can we work together to help each other. Essentially, we have a very close working relationship, and she was honest about her level of knowledge. She had a base understanding of kind of neurodivergent conditions and ADHD, but it wasn't huge. And she did a bit of her own research, and we came up with a plan. And they were such kind of simple things of just if tasks were delegated to me. One of my biggest things is that I will have a face-to-face conversation, and I will engage in the conversation, but I will take absolutely none of it actually into my working memory. So we'd have a handover, and then a week later she'd say to me, "Oh, did you manage to get so and so done?" And I wouldn't even remember that I'd been asked to do that. So we looked at kind of just having tasks written down in an email. And something also that helps is having a set deadline. So if I don't have a deadline for a task, then it falls down my list of priorities. Whereas if something needs to be done by a set time, I will absolutely get that done. Every single essay I ever wrote in university was written the night before, and I'd love to change that. But realistically, I mean, I'm not writing essays anymore, but it is a lot of last minute. However, that's what I need, that urgency. I need that kind of risk factor to motivate me to get something done. And nothing feels better than beating the odds. So that really helped. Things like just being, when we had those verbal handovers, to know that when I was typing on my phone, it's not me replying to an email and not engaging in the conversation. It's me making notes of what we're saying and taking down reminders. And I remember there was a moment when we were sat in the office and I was typing an email, and she went to kind of initiate a conversation with me. And I looked up from my screen, and I was ready to have the conversation, and she kind of stopped midway and said, "Oh, sorry, hang on, finish what you're doing, and then as soon as you finish, let's have a chat." And it was such a tiny little thing, and it wasn't necessarily the action of allowing me to finish what I'm doing, because realistically we'd have had that conversation. I had completely forgotten the email I was sending, and I'd have found it 6 months later in my drafts unsent. It was the fact that she'd thought about me, and she'd kind of identified that she may distract me, and that may prevent me from doing something. And she just said, "Just finish what you're doing, and then let's have a chat." And that was so powerful, and just made me feel, from an emotional perspective, appreciated and seen. And we talk about culture and emotional intelligence, and that's one of my kind of key mantras, especially in hospitality, is that the cultural piece and the emotional side of making people feel looked after and supported and seen and welcome is, for me, the most important part of kind of this concept of neuro inclusion and how we support our people. We can look at all the kind of physical reasonable adjustments in the world, and again, we can discuss about hospitality and how typical reasonable adjustments are very difficult to implement in hospitality. But actually, just making someone feel cared for and looked after and supported is something we've when you talk about leadership in any business, but hospitality are brilliant leaders. We always talk about supporting our team. So it's just kind of taking that next layer, if you will, and really understanding how people work and being able to adjust your leadership to how that person works, which again is something, concept we've discussed for for years and years and years, and then understanding that that person may have a certain neurodivergent condition. And I'm absolutely not saying that I expect people to be experts in every single neurodivergent condition, because that is just, it's not possible.
Yeah.
And also, I think it then takes away from the fact that there's a very kind of common saying that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And whilst people may have the same label, quote unquote, their experience and the way that that neurodivergent condition manifests within them will be very different. And so, it's not about having a checklist of things you do when someone says they have OCD, dyslexia. It's about having a procedure and a process of getting to know what works for that person. And that kind of reflecting on that situation is what led to the formation of ADHospitalityD, and the fact that I'd reflected and realised that kind of 50% of my ability to feel like I was really thriving again in hospitality was my understanding of what ADHD meant to me.
Yeah.
And then the other side was having an employer who also understood and was able to support me. And those two things together was an absolute game changer for me. And that's why I'm sitting where I'm sitting now, and we're having this conversation, because I want to be able to try and help people to also experience that and understand themselves and work for businesses that also understand them. And like I said earlier, kind of hopefully try and make the hospitality an even better place than it already is.
Yeah, but my life, there's so many things here to unpack, really. I mean, notwithstanding the feeling that I can totally kind of cast myself into your shoes in that moment whereby you got the diagnosis, and all of a sudden, on the one hand, there's clarity around maybe now there's a reason as to why certain things I've found really difficult, and not just difficult, I just don't have the propensity or desire to actually want to or can even get into moving that forward. But then at the same time, it's like, oh, I can imagine the next thought is also then, okay, well, shit, is this thing going to hold me back? Because that's probably, you're probably conditioned to think that way based around the education of the moment in which you found yourself. Is that's maybe where your brain goes next, just because that's what that's where the world's at in that moment with the education on this.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a big kind of discussion that I've only recently seen, actually, and it was really interesting to me. And it was something that I experienced where someone was discussing how it felt as if they'd received an autism diagnosis, and they had a therapist, and they spoke to the therapist, and they said, since receiving this autism diagnosis, I feel like my autism has got worse. And that I resonated with that a little bit, because I remember after my diagnosis kind of feeling a little bit like that. And the therapist explained that to them, and that actually what is happening is that it's not getting worse. It's just that you're kind of allowing yourself to live in it for a little bit. And actually, there's a theory of something called masking with neurodivergent conditions, where consciously or subconsciously you go through life adjusting your kind of innate reactions or your typical behavior to fit into kind of the social norms and boundaries of, the society that we live in. So, for example, someone who has autism may feel incredibly overwhelmed in a environment where there's lots of sensory stimuli, and that may be causing them to feel incredibly stressed and incredibly anxious. And it may make them feel as if, the one way to deal with that is to, have an kind of external reaction. And, just the same way that when you stub your toe and you say, shit, it's kind of that same thing, because for them, that stress and anxiety is similar to feeling pain. But they know that if they did that, people would think they were weird. So they can't do that. And they've lived their life suppressing that behavior that's not deemed to be normal. And so there is a kind of period after a diagnosis where you're kind of kinder to yourself a little bit, and you let yourself, unmask, and that's kind of quite a cathartic experience. And yeah, I just found that really interesting about, that experience once that diagnosis happens, and how you then have the opportunity to be kinder to yourself and to learn how to work with what you have. And that it just, it doesn't mean that you're any less. It just means that you work in a different way.
Yeah. I think that phraseology is absolutely bang on. You learn to work with what you have. It is the only way in the end. It doesn't necessarily happen immediately when you get a diagnosis, and this is the same with any health diagnosis of any kind, I guess. And again, I've just from my own story, I have at age 39 I was diagnosed with a spinal condition. And for a lot of the initial phase of that, it explained a lot. So there was on the one hand, I was like, great, I now kind of understand why these things have been happening. But the second thing was, okay, so now I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't do this, and and all of this major focus on all of the things that I could no longer do. And it wasn't until I literally woke up one day and went, I'm a little bit bored of focusing on what I can't do. I'm just going to start focusing on what I can do. And that was a game changer for me in terms of how to approach this new part of your life. Well, actually, it's an old part of the life, but this new understanding of this whole part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. That's that. You learn to find ways that allow you to achieve what you need to achieve. If you're 5'2" and you work behind the bar, and someone orders a top shelf whiskey, no matter how much you stretch and try, you're not going to reach it. So, you may grab a stool and stand on that stool, and then you can reach it. That's exactly the same thing. You just find the way that works for you with what you have to achieve what you want to achieve. And, to expand on that, of course, it's about the support that's available for you to achieve what you want to achieve. But, being a 5'2" bartender doesn't mean your cocktails are any worse or any better than the 6'6" bartender. It just means you need a stool to reach the top shelf.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at.
Yeah, you raise such a good point. And actually, you just made me randomly think of the origins of the name of the character, Jack Reacher, which I'm not going to get into because it's completely irrelevant for what we're speaking about. But in any case, the other thing that popped into my head there is you kind of just simplified this for us in language terms so that we could probably all kind of just say it in our own businesses. But also, my overriding thought is that there are probably way more people that we work with who have some degree of neurodiversity that there's probably way more that we really know about or understand. But now, am I overreaching, if you pardon the pun? I think in the end, it just feels like we've probably got more work to do, I suppose, for this to become a kind of more normal and an accepted discussion to be able to have with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the reasons I kind of started this journey was for that reason, because the Burnt Chef Project estimate that as many as 1 in 2 people in hospitality may have a neurodivergent condition, which...
Wow, right. Well, there we go then.
Yeah, it is a huge statistic, and the kind of national figures vary with the kind of general population level, but it's estimated to be somewhere between 10 to 15%. So with hospitality sitting at 50%, it is something that, is prevalent to our industry to be discussing. And I think it's something actually when we dig deeper that we've always known but not named. So I remember listening to kind of podcasts with Tom Kerridge and hearing him talk about he kind of refers to his team as pirates and the pirate ship, and talks about kind of being outlaws and outcasts and kind of misfits. And, not everyone in hospitality wants to be referred to as an outcast or a misfit or whatever, but, we for a lot of people in hospitality, there's a reason we don't work in an office. And for me, I can't think of anything. I couldn't think of anything kind of worse, and that's why I loved it so much. And the amount of, you walk into a kitchen and you probably, you ask the question, how many of you struggled in school? And probably 90% of people will put their hands up. And that's not necessarily because they have a neurodivergent condition, but hospitality is an industry where it isn't a typical 9 to 5, and people who have neurodivergent conditions are often drawn to industries that are away from the norm. So you'll find a big prevalence in creative industries, in the arts especially, but also there's similar numbers to hospitality in healthcare, in the services, so things like the fire service, police service, the ambulance service, and in the military. Now, we're not saving lives, but again, there's that, it's high pressure environments, it's quick changing environments. It's also, one thing is that kind of personal element of it. People really enjoy the relationship side of things and dealing with people. And so hospitality as an industry is where some of the strengths that people with neurodivergent conditions have are actually exemplified. If you can work well under pressure, then hospitality is a brilliant industry for you, because as we know, there's consistent pressure at times, and if you can adapt to change easily, then again, hospitality is a great industry for you to work in. And those are some of the very typical strengths of someone with a neurodivergent condition, is that ability to react very quickly to pressure and almost thrive in it. Like I said, it was always those kind of chaotic shifts that I love the most. My least favorite shift was a Monday lunchtime, because you do 10 covers if you were lucky, and you'd be kind of trying to find things to do. Whereas give me a buzzing Saturday night or a Sunday lunch service, and that was when I was in my element. And so I think I was saying, kind of, it's this journey started by wanting to share my story and knowing that there were probably other people out there with similar experiences. And I remember I first shared a blog with the Burnt Chef project that kind of went into my story, and I was a little bit nervous as to what the reaction would be, whether it would be well received, whether I may, and maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but I do see comments online from, I shouldn't read the comments on Daily Mail articles, but there we go.
Oh yes, the old, it wasn't like that in my day.
Exactly, of didn't have ADHD in my day, just get on with it, blah blah blah. And there was part of me that was quite worried that some comments maybe along those lines, and absolutely not. I was stupid to think that in hospitality. The reaction was overwhelmingly and all positive. People were so supportive, and actually I had numerous messages of people saying, I really resonate with your story. And it was actually just last week I woke up to a text from one of my friends in the industry that says, we hadn't spoken for a couple of months, and he just said, hey, just so I'd let you know, I'm on my second day of taking Elvans, which is a medication for ADHD. It was your blog that led me to seek a diagnosis. He said, and the change I'm seeing already is huge. I'm finding less mood swings, I'm more concentrated, and it just, thanks for sharing your story, because I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you. And it was like, fuck, that I got goosebumps, because that is, for me, I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. If I can help one person, then I've done what I wanted to do. And but now, of course, I want to try and help as many people as possible. But that was so powerful to hear, and just so kind of an incredible kind of thing to hear, to help, that to know that I'd helped someone. And now I hope that I get to do the same many times over, and even if it's just something as simple as having a conversation in the canteen, or just demonstrating, if you are a leader, just demonstrating that you have an awareness of neurodivergent conditions can make people within your team feel so much more comfortable, because we talk about kind of, you can't fix a problem if you don't know what it is. And yeah, I'm not saying it's a problem, but there will be challenges that people face with neurodivergent conditions. And if you're not aware that they have these challenges, then you can't help them overcome them. But also, there is a stigma sometimes attached to neurodivergent conditions. So we need to be able to demonstrate to our team that we are welcoming and we want to support you, and you will face no stigma. And if we can make people feel comfortable and open up when they feel comfortable about the challenges that they face, then we have the opportunity to help them overcome them. And even if we look at it from a, you've got the warm, colourful, hospitable side of being wonderful people like we all are, but even if you want to look at it from a black and white commercial aspect, then the more comfortable your team are, the more effective they're going to be in their role. And when you break it down to the numbers, then that's the black and white. Of course, I want people to do it for the colourful, happy hospitality reasons that but at the end of the day, it just makes good business sense.
100%. I mean, at the end of the day, we are supposed to be like the industry of welcoming people, and that stretches to the team as well, right? It's not just about the guest; it's just about creating spaces that people want to be in, whether you're a team member or whether you're a guest, and that there's just no downside really for taking this stuff seriously and being inclusive about it. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer.
Absolutely, 100%. And again, I really like the saying that, like, as you were saying about culture, people don't leave a company, they leave a culture. Because we live in a world now where there are more opportunities for employment with regards to improvement in transport, and especially if someone wants to leave the industry as a whole, they can work from home, and they've got access to Indeed and LinkedIn, and they know that gone are the days. Sorry, the caterer, but gone are the days of looking in the back of the caterer for jobs. You may use the website, of course, but you can find a new job at the click of a button now. And what is stopping someone? What is keeping people in your business when they can find a new job so easily now? And you can do what you need to with the money you pay people. And there are a very, very few, especially these days, kind of businesses where they can people go there for 12 months to get them on their CV, and they can survive off that. That's kind of still a thing, but very, very few businesses can rely on that. So what is it that's making you stand out as an employer? And the concept of your employer brand, what's making you stand out? And culture is what makes you stand out. And people want to work, as you said, for businesses that are going to make them feel seen and make them feel valued and look after them. And especially in hospitality, we don't work from home. We work very closely together for long hours, late at night sometimes. And that's why community and culture are, we're not in an office environment with headsets on where, you may have some conversations, you are shoulder to shoulder with people. So in hospitality, especially, that cultural piece is hugely important. And I think, and do you know what, I actually think that when with AI kind of automations and standardizations coming through, I think it's only going to become even more important, where I think people are going to start craving human interaction even more. AI, great, like, I use it for certain things. Businesses should be using it where possible. But I think there is going to be people starting to crave human interaction more and more, and caring more about community and culture. And I think if we can get ahead of that, then fantastic.
Well, for sure. I mean, I think really in the end, if we're the industry that all of a sudden is going to have the premium jobs, it's all going to be flipped on its head, because we'll be the jobs will be the industry that has all of the human to human contact jobs that just cannot be taken by a machine. But anyway, that's a subject for another day. Look, I just want to say a massive thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story, but also sharing a little bit about why you're here and your new direction. People should absolutely reach out to you if they want to do that. What is the best method for them to do so?
So the numerous methods. So first of all, I'm on LinkedIn. So that's Gareth Rees, and that's REES. There's numerous spellings of Rees as a surname. Or ADHospitalityD. Also Instagram, I'm just at ADHospitalityD, or feel free to pop me an email. It's just gareth@ADhospitalityD.com. And, I'm more than happy to have any conversations about anything. If it's you just want someone to, you have a big problem that you need some help with, have a chat with me. Or you've got a question, a query, even if it's, what word should I be using? Because, there's a lot of kind of worry of using the wrong terminology, and I can guarantee you that people will value your want to, look after them more than you may use the wrong word. So please don't let that stop you from showing care. But essentially, from tiny to big, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to have a chat. And if you want to learn more, follow along. And I try and kind of share reflections on the industry and neurodivergence, specifically in hospitality. Like I said, there's a lot of content out there around neurodivergent conditions, which is wonderful, but I try and keep mine as specific to the experience of hospitality as possible.
Superb, and I will absolutely put the details in the show notes as well.
Fantastic.
And all that remains for me to say really is thank you so much for giving up your time for the show.
No, thank you for having me, Phil. It's been a pleasure.
Good man. And I think it's brilliant what you're doing. So I wish you all the very best for the next stage of your journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Nice one. Thanks so much, Gareth. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye. And there we have it. Gareth Rees on neurodiversity, leadership, and why understanding how people actually work might just be the key to helping them thrive. Who'd have thought? A really important conversation, and a massive thank you to him. We will, of course, be back next week with another awesome journey from hospitality, so have yourselves a cracking week, and I'll see you then.